Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take a stack of sources. It could be academic papers involving political trends, or like today, a really fascinating blend of shared prophetic visions, social media accounts, and some pretty intricate calendar math, and basically extract the core insights for you.
Right. We want you to walk away understanding exactly what's being claimed and, maybe more importantly, why people are believing it.
Exactly.
And this time we're diving deep into this idea of prophetic convergence. The sources we've got are incredibly specific. They lay out this multi-layered case for, well, a monumental world-changing event.
Either the rapture or the start of the tribulation.
Yes, focused entirely on one single date, November 7th, 2025.
And what's just remarkable here is you have these seemingly independent ways of thinking, right? Someone has a highly dramatic vision. Others are poring over ancient texts, looking at numerology.
Right, doing the math.
And somehow they all land on this exact 24-hour period. It's quite something.
So our job today is to unpack that alignment objectively. We're going to lay out the biblical links they're using, the history, the complex numerology, and the real-world signs they point to.
We're basically following their logic, step by step.
Exactly, to show you how they arrive at November 7th, 2025.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We should trace the timeline. Where does this date, November 7th, 2025, first pop up in these sources? Like, what's the origin point?
It seems to start with a reported vision. This was apparently received around October 17th.
Okay.
And the person who had it described seeing this. Immense figure. An angel, they said, 3 times their size.
Wow.
And this figure apparently shouted just one thing.
Which was?
The tribulation begins on November 7th. Just that.
Okay, that's definitely a compelling starting point. But, it could feel a bit arbitrary without some kind of confirmation.
Absolutely. And the sources didn't stop there. They immediately tried to validate it, mapping this date onto the ancient Hebrew calendar.
Ah, okay.
And that's really where the convergence starts to build. November 7th, 2025 lines up with the 15th day of the 8th month on the Hebrew calendar.
The month of Cheshvan, or Heshvan.
Right. And for these followers, that specific date, Heshvan 15th, has this deeply negative prophetic significance attached to it.
Okay, tell me more about that. The Jeroboam connection, right. Why would a calendar change from 3,000 years ago be so key for interpreting something in 2025?
Well, it goes back to King Jeroboam the First. Remember when the kingdom of Israel split after Solomon?
Yeah, the northern kingdom.
Jeroboam led those northern tribes. And he didn't want his people going down to Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. God had ordained that feast for the 15th day of the 7th month, Tishrei.
Right.
But Jeroboam just, arbitrarily moved it. 1 month later, to the 15th day of the 8th month, Heshvan.
Ah, so the sources look at any event tied to Heshvan 15th as following this kind of illegitimate man-made calendar. It's marked by historical rebellion.
Precisely. It signals a day of judgment linked to apostasy, to turning away. But then they connect it to the ultimate cataclysmic judgment, Noah's flood.
Okay, how does that work?
Genesis 7.11. It states the flood began on the 17th day of the 2nd month.
Which in some traditions maps to Heshvan 17th.
Exactly. So they take the vision date, November 7th, which is Heshvan 15th, and sort of refine it slightly, focusing on that Heshvan 17th window around November 7th. They argue it lines up perfectly with the original world-ending event.
So it becomes this literal time echo, the world's previous great judgment mirroring this predicted future one.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And once they've anchored the date to the flood event, they bring in what they see as mathematical proof, kind of a divine authorship stamp. They call it the 117 code.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting, especially if you're fascinated by pattern recognition in texts.
Definitely.
So the 117 code is presented as the mathematical key confirming the timing, and it comes from the flood date itself.
Yeah, the 2 components, the 1st and the 17th, put them together, you get 117.
Okay.
And they argue this number isn't random. It's a central divine marker. Now, the obvious question you'd ask is, well, couldn't you find 117 anywhere if you looked hard enough?
Yeah, confirmation bias, right.
That's what the sources push back against.
Yeah.
They claim the number shows up at statistically unlikely but very critical points in Scripture.
Okay, walk us through their evidence. What are the specific examples they use to trace this divine marker?
They highlight 4 main convergences. First, obviously, the flood date itself, Genesis 7.11, that's the source.
Okay.
Second, And this is highly significant to them, Psalm 117.
Why Psalm 117?
Because it's the exact middle chapter of the entire Protestant Bible, smack in the center. They see it as a central signpost pointing directly to the event.
Huh. Okay, that's neat. A coincidence, maybe, but still just one chapter number.
True. But then they jump to Revelation 11.7.
And what happens there?
That passage describes a really critical prophetic turning point. It's when the beast comes up from the abyss and overcomes the two witnesses. Note the numbers again. Chapter 11, verse 7.
11 and 7 again. Okay. So flood date, middle of the Bible, and a pivotal moment in the end times narrative.
And there's one more major one. They look at the New Testament structure. If you count the total number of chapters in the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, plus the book of Acts.
Which is kind of the beginning of the church structure.
Right. In the Greek New Testament, that total comes out to exactly 117 chapters.
Wow. Okay. So their claim is this repeated, pretty complex pattern across different parts of the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, beginning, middle, proves the timing is divinely set, not just accidental. They're looking for these interlocking confirmations.
That's the argument. Exactly. It sort of solidifies the date for them, but they still need this idea of a warning period, like a countdown.
Right, the 7-day warning.
We go back to the Noah parallel again. Genesis 7.2 says Noah was actually in the ark for 7 days before the rain started.
Okay, so that sets the countdown clock. If the main event is pegged around November 7th,
then this 7-day warning period has to kick off around November 1st, 2025, and they correlate that start date, November 1st, to Heshvan 10, which they say is the day Noah actually entered the ark.
Okay, but if a countdown starts, they'd need some kind of trigger, right? A major, globally visible event happening right around that November 1st, 2025 window.
And that's what they zeroed in on.
Yeah.
The opening ceremony of the new Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
They didn't see it as just a cultural event, though. They interpreted it as this globally significant, almost ominous signpost.
Okay, let's break down the symbolism they supposedly decoded in that GM opening. It sounds like they focus a lot on the language used and who was there.
They really did. First, the guests. The presence of 79 international delegations was flagged immediately.
79. Why that number?
They connect that number directly to Revelation 13.7. That verse talks about the Antichrist having authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. So seeing 79 delegations gathered was taken as a symbolic confirmation of this global authority starting to consolidate.
And the key phrase they were listening for, peace and safety.
Yes. That phrase is like a massive red flag in prophetic interpretation circles.
Because of 1 Thessalonians?
Exactly. 1 Thessalonians 5 warns that destruction comes suddenly when people are saying peace and safety. So for these sources, hearing that phrase used prominently in the official speeches, the materials around the GM opening.
Globally broadcast.
Globally broadcast, yes. That was seen as a direct contemporary warning sign that the time was incredibly close.
And the museum itself, the artifacts, provided a visual prophecy, the solar bark imagery.
Absolutely. The solar bark, the boat of the Egyptian sun god Ra, its prominence in the ceremony was interpreted as a direct visual parallel to Noah's Ark being lifted up by the floodwaters.
So telegraphing the rapture event itself, the catching up?
That's how they read it.
Yeah.
It connects the ancient judgment, the flood, with a modern predicted judgment, the rapture, or the start of the tribulation.
Okay, that connects the dots on the warning period and the trigger. Now let's tackle maybe the most complex piece of their methodology. The attempt to pinpoint the exact moment of the event. They called it the Harpazo code.
That's right. They weren't just looking for the day, they were trying to nail down the exact second of the catching away.
How did they even approach that?
It starts, again, with personal experiences, dreams. Specifically, dreams featuring a clock showing a very specific time, 1:26 a.m.
4:26 in the morning. That seems like a really odd, almost random time for a huge world event. How do they possibly make the jump from 1:26 a.m. to something numerically significant?
Okay, this is where it gets highly technical. They use something called the Swahili clock conversion. It's a very specialized piece of their logic.
The Swahili clock.
Yeah. Apparently, in some equatorial cultures, particularly in East Africa where Swahili is spoken, timekeeping is structured differently than in the West. Time 0, or 1 o'clock, isn't midnight. It's fixed at sunrise, which is roughly 6 a.m. year-round, near the equator.
Oh, interesting. So their clock is essentially 6 hours off from our standard clock. Like 7 a.m. our time is 1 o'clock their time.
Pretty much, yeah. It creates this fixed 6-hour offset. The sources refer to it as the upside-down clock.
Okay.
So if you take the dream time, 1:26 a.m., and you factor in this cultural offset, plus you have to account for potential daylight saving time shifts that might be happening globally around that November date.
Right. DST can be tricky.
When they do that calculation, the time of 1:26 a.m. converts to 7:26 p.m.
And that conversion gives them the confirmation number they're looking for, 726.
Exactly. The final step is the linguistic connection. They go to Strong's Concordance, the Greek dictionary of the Bible. The entry for the number 726 corresponds to the Greek word harpazo.
Harpazo. And what does that word mean? Why is its number so crucial here?
Harpazo means to seize, snatch, or catch away suddenly and forcefully.
Oh.
It is the exact word used in 1 Thessalonians 4:17 to describe believers being caught up to meet the Lord in the air. So, by using this very specialized multi-step conversion dream time, cultural clock offset, DST adjustment, Strong's number, the sources argue they've pinpointed 7:26 p.m. as the divinely designated moment for the snatching away. A truly precise, calculated time.
That is an astonishing level of intricate reasoning just to land on one specific minute. Okay, let's move on to some broader calendar confirmations they cite, and this includes what they see as the ultimate numerical signpost, the 666 correlation.
Right. So beyond the specific moment, this whole narrative argues that the events clustering around late 2025 fulfill the last 3 major Jewish feasts that haven't yet had their prophetic fulfillment.
Which are?
The Feast of Trumpets, seen as signaling resurrection, the Day of Atonement, linked to judgment and separation, and the Feast of Tabernacles, about God dwelling with his people. They see November 7th, 2025 as this critical convergence point for all 3.
Okay, and then we get to the 6666 calculation. Now look, if you calculate the days between almost any 2 dates, you're bound to hit numbers that seem significant sometimes, right? How do the sources justify this calculation, finding 666 days as divine confirmation and not just, finding what you're looking for?
They frame it very specifically. They call it an enemy signpost that actually confirms God's timeline.
Okay.
They start their calculation on a date they identify as significant, January 11th, 2024. They see this date as a celestial marker, often associated with kind of 11.11 symbolism in some circles. Yeah. Then they calculate the duration between that date, January 11th, 2024, and their target date, November 7th, 2025, specifically tying it to Heshvan 17th, again, for the flood parallel.
And the number of days is?
Exactly, 666 days.
So the logic is, the devil himself, or the system represented by 660s, unwittingly confirms God's schedule by having his number placed perfectly at the end of this prophetic countdown period.
That is the core argument, yes. They see it as God using the ultimate symbol of rebellion and the Antichrist system to validate the timeline derived from the vision from Jeroboam's illegitimate calendar change, the flood date, and the 117 code. It all ties together.
Given how much all of this relies on precision, the 117 code, the 726 harpazo moment, the 666-day count, it actually makes sense that the sources express a serious distrust of normal earthly timekeeping.
Oh, absolutely. They bring up things like the Mandela effect or just general discrepancies you might find on astronomical websites about moon phases or timings.
Yeah.
They see this as proof that human-made calendars and clocks are being subtly altered or are maybe just inherently unreliable for pinpointing divine appointments.
So what do they rely on instead?
They fall back on what they trust completely, the moon. They describe the moon, referencing Genesis 1 and Psalm 104, as God's faithful witness in the sky.
The one celestial clock that can't be messed with, essentially.
That's their perspective. It's the ultimate reliable timekeeper for God's plan.
Okay, so all this incredibly complex math, the historical deep dives, the calendar alignments, it's all aimed at predicting this single pivotal moment. Let's shift perspective now to the emotional and physical reality described in the visions themselves. What do the sources say the actual harvest event looks like?
The scene is described very vividly. We're drawing here from accounts like one from Crease Gaming. It talks about millions of angels arriving, and they're described as incredibly bright, like lighting up the entire earth.
Oh.
God is visualized as a light that's brighter than the sun. Michael the archangel is apparently prominent, holding a cross sword. It's not subtle. It's portrayed as a globally visible, high-drama, unmistakable arrival.
And the process of who gets taken, it's described as highly selective, isn't it? Not just everyone who identifies as a believer.
Very much so. The description is quite specific. Angels physically descend, and they know exactly who to take. They seem to focus especially on certain demographics, children, teenagers, young adults. These groups are described as the pure, or maybe the newly faithful.
And those left behind.
They're often depicted as kneeling, maybe in shock or despair. These are portrayed as the ones who mocked the warnings or
Yeah.
perhaps refused to fully believe or commit.
What happens on Earth immediately after this separation occurs, according to these visions?
The physical impact is described as instantaneous and violent. A massive destructive earthquake starts almost immediately.
Like right away.
Right away. Cities crumble, buildings fall down. This destruction isn't just random chaos, though. It's interpreted as the Earth starting to, reset itself, returning to a more natural, maybe pre-human state. Nature quickly starts reclaiming the land as human structures break down.
And the destination for those who are saved, who are taken.
They're described as being taken to the kingdom of light.
Okay.
This place is portrayed as somewhere for resting, for reunion with loved ones who passed away previously, and also for receiving maybe further understanding about everything that's happened. What's quite interesting is that one vision notes that some people who are taken still seem to be questioning themselves, like, why me? Or am I worthy? It suggests the transition isn't an instant erasure of all human doubt, but maybe a continuing process of faith and understanding even after being saved.
So bringing this all together, what does this complex picture mean for you, the listener? I mean, the narrative we've unpacked is this highly intricate tapestry, isn't it?
It really is. It weaves together that initial, startling vision, the angel rationing the date with ancient historical rebellion through Jeroboam's calendar.
Ties it all back to Noah's great flood.
Validates it with multiple layers of numerology, the 117 code from Genesis, the 726 Heart Hazo code from the Dream Conversion, and that 666-day span.
And then links it all to a contemporary warning sign that people could actually see, like the GM opening.
The sheer internal consistency of the logic used by these different sources, how they connect these disparate elements, it's striking. Now, whether or not you accept the premise, you have to acknowledge the complexity of the structure they've built.
Yeah, it's quite elaborate.
And it relies so heavily on identifying specific patterns and symbols, not just in ancient texts, but in historical dates and modern globally prominent events.
And that reliance on pattern recognition, on decoding symbols in the now, is maybe the key takeaway here. They believe the divine plan isn't just history. It's written into the mathematics of time and the symbols of our present world.
Exactly.
Which really makes you consider, doesn't it? If this approach to prophecy relies so heavily on spotting symbols in contemporary events like a museum opening or a specific date sequence, what current globally significant events might other groups be interpreting right now, using similar methods perhaps? And what specific outcomes might they be pinpointing that maybe we haven't even heard about yet? That's something for you to perhaps mull over as you observe the world unfolding around you.